Good evening, I'm Ebony Brandon. Today is Monday, the 22nd of January, 2018. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. In the headlines tonight, nationally, 45-year-old Shirley Dawn Morton is the country's second homicide victim. Internationally, Saudi Arabia has pledged $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. And in sport, Novak Djokovic has been eliminated from the Australian Open by Hyung Chung. We have the details of these stories, the weather and Carib update, all straight ahead in tonight's edition of SKN News Now. St. Kitts and Nevis on Sunday recorded the first homicide of a female and its second homicide of the year. Like the first homicide victim last week, this latest incident also occurred in Nevis. At about 5 p.m. on Sunday, police in Gingerland responded to a report at Buckhill. There, they found the lifeless body of a woman in a house on Hanley's Road. The woman has since been identified as 45-year-old Shirley Dawn Morton of Hanley's Road. She had visible injuries to the head and was pronounced dead at the scene by Dr. Shandy Jacobs. Police are presently searching for Morton's boyfriend, Wayne Spire Chapman, who's the owner of the house where she was found. They believe that he may have vital information relevant to the investigation into her death. The cause of death and other specifics of the incident have not been revealed by police. However, they have confirmed that a number of items of evidential value have been processed by crime scene technicians. In 2017, 3 women, a teenage girl, fell victim to violent homicides in the Federation. Of the 3, 2 of those homicides occurred on Nevis. On Wednesday last week, the Federation recorded its first homicide, 19-year-old Cleon Brown, who was shot to death in Rollins Village, Nevis. In 2017, Nevis also recorded the Federation's first homicide when the body of 44-year-old Leon Gums was found in his home with 2 gunshot wounds to the body. Of the 23 homicides recorded last year, 9 occurred in Nevis, which has a population of about 17,000 people. The National Assembly will have its first sitting of 2018 tomorrow morning at 10. This has been one of the more anticipated sittings as the government will seek to introduce the Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018, which will make vital changes to existing law, allowing for the newly installed $600,000 traffic lights to be commissioned. Also down for its first and second reading is the St. Christopher Air and Seaports Authority Amendment Bill 2018. Both these bills will be introduced by Minister of Public Infrastructure, Posts, Urban Development and Transportation, Ian Liburd. Also coming before the House is the Development Control and Planning Amendment Bill 2018, which will have its first and second readings. It will be introduced by Minister of Finance, Sustainable Development, National Security, People Empowerment and Constituency Empowerment, Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris. And in other developments, one of the 2 persons detained last Wednesday in connection with the marijuana found in a water heater at the port at Bird Rock has been charged. While the other person released remains unidentified, police this morning revealed that the owner of Prestige Trucking Services, Romeo Tweed, has been charged by the Customs and Excise Department for false declaration, importation of cannabis sativa concealed in a container, importation of restricted goods, to wit cannabis sativa, and attempted fraudulent evasion. Police too have laid their own charges against Tweed for the offences of possession of cannabis with intent to supply, and importation of cannabis. Tweed, who resides in Kitts Doddats, appeared before the court last week and has been released on bail. On January 17th, Customs and police officers carried out a search on a package marked Prestige Trucking Services. The box was being cleared by Mr. Tweed. 12 packages with a vegetable material suspected to be cannabis were found inside a water heater that was enclosed in the box. The marijuana found weighed just over 18 pounds. On a related note, 2 persons were taken into police custody after finding what they believe to be cannabis and a bulletproof vest at a residence in Phillips Village. The person who resides at the home, along with another person who was carrying out construction work on the building, were both taken into police custody and have been assisting with investigations. No names have been released. A small quantity of what was also suspected to be cannabis was found in a vehicle owned by the resident. Police said last week that it is likely that charges will be laid against the persons involved in this operation, which was carried out by the Police Anti-Gang Task Force. 27 registered and active fisherfolk will now feel safer when out on the ocean, as they've received new Uniden two-way radios. The radios were made available to them by the Department of Marine Resources. The radios, distributed by the Department of Marine Resources, were procured under the Climate Change Adaptation in the Eastern Caribbean Fisheries Sector, or CC4FISH program. The CC4FISH initiative was designed to improve fisherfolk and agriculturalists' resilience to climate change and is funded by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO. According to the Department of Marine Resources, after an assessment of the fishermen and women and their individual needs, it was determined who would most need the radios. In addition to improving fisherfolk's safety while at sea, the radios will also hopefully aid in improving their catch through better communication. The radios will allow users to contact the St. Kitts and Nevis Coast Guard Unit or the Department of Marine Resources while they're out on the ocean. This is particularly useful in the event of a mishap. The agencies can also use the two-way radios to issue bulletins and advisories to persons at sea. Under the CC4FISH project, 150 radios and several ice machines have been procured for distribution to fisherfolk and fishing facilities in St. Kitts and Nevis. And that wraps up our national developments this evening. Stay with us, still to come in just a moment from now, international developments. Saudi Arabia has vowed to donate $1.5 billion, half of the United Nations humanitarian appeal for Yemen, which has been largely devastated by years of war. But as the conflict continues, the situation is also deteriorating in areas controlled by the Saudi-backed government. In the southern port city of Aden, secessionists say they want to overthrow the internationally recognized government. Osama bin Javid reports.
The UN says $3 billion will be needed if Yemeni children are to stop eating out of dumpsters. That money will also be used to provide health, sanitation and basic necessities to 11 million people desperate for humanitarian aid. Half of that $3 billion has been promised by Saudi Arabia as it continues to carry out attacks in Yemen. It's targeting Houthi rebels, but rights groups say most of those dying are civilians.
It's not just the people who die directly because of the war and the conflict itself, it's those people who die those silent deaths in their villages or in their towns where they haven't been able to access good health or access medical facilities and die for preventable diseases, especially children.
The conflict in Yemen is complicated. The calm in the port city of Aden deceptively hides a political storm brewing between opposing parties supported by the same coalition. UAE-backed southern secessionists are threatening the Saudi-backed and internationally recognized government. The secessionists have fought for control of air and sea ports. Now southern forces led by the man appointed by President Hadi as the governor of Aden have announced the beginning of the process to overthrow the Hadi government.
We reject the deployment of any northern forces to the south. While we appreciate their military role and the necessity of forming northern resistance forces to fight the Houthis in the north.
Aden is the de facto capital of the Hadi government, but President Hadi has been based in Saudi Arabia due to security concerns. His Prime Minister Ahmed bin Dagher has struggled to control southern Yemen despite support from Saudi Arabia. The US gives logistical guidance at the Saudi military headquarters in Riyadh, as well as selling them weapons. Russia also wants a role in Yemen, but there's concern based on other Middle Eastern conflicts it would tilt in favor of the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. Russia insists it just wants peace. In the complicated chessboard of war, babies are dying of hunger. Yemenis just want it to end, regardless of who can make that happen.
School, churches and markets in Zambia are reopening 3 weeks after the government introduced emergency measures to contain a cholera outbreak. At least 74 people have died of the disease since September last year. Victoria Gatenby has the details.
It's time to go back to school for these Zambians a week later than usual.
How are you today?
The start of term was delayed to allow inspectors time to check every school's water and sanitation system to try to bring a cholera outbreak under control.
We are very happy to see that the government has allowed us to open. They've controlled the cholera, and we are ready now to go in class and start teaching our children.
Since September, more than 3,200 Zambians have been infected with cholera. Most live in or around the capital, Lusaka. It's a bacterial disease usually spread through contaminated water. Left untreated, it can kill within hours. Earlier this month, the government deployed the army to lead a clean-up of public spaces, banned public gatherings and introduced a curfew. It says sufficient progress has now been made for it to ease some of these restrictions.
We're getting back to normalcy. We want people to begin to trade again, because we understand our traders have had to pass through a rough time of not trading. 2-3 weeks of disruption is big enough to disrupt their normal livelihoods as well.
Farmers welcome the reopening of marketplaces but say the outbreak has badly damaged their livelihoods.
It reached a level where even outlets such as Pick and Pay, ShopRite, could not have vegetables because farmers could not bring in the vegetables. Farmers could not bring in the tomatoes. Farmers could not bring in the fruits. So the impact was very bad on the farmers, but again, it also impacted on the chain stores.
The government says the number of new cholera cases has dropped significantly since it introduced the emergency measures. But for some Zambians, it's too little, too late. They accuse ministers of mismanaging Lusaka's water system and causing the outbreak in the first place.
Still to come in this evening's news presentation, sport, the weather and Carib update. We turn to tennis this evening, where South Korea's Hyung Chung played superbly to beat Novak Djokovic at the Australian Open as the six-time champion struggled with injury. Chung, who's 21 years old, won 7-6, 7-4, 7-5, 7-6, 7-3 to become the first Korean player to reach the last 8 at a Grand Slam. He will face another surprise quarter-finalist after American Denis Sandgren upset 5th seed Dominic Thiem. Djokovic, who's 30 years old, had treatment to his right elbow after the first set and was visibly in pain at times. The Serb, seeded 14th, missed the second half of the 2017 season with an elbow injury and was making his return to competitive action in Melbourne. Djokovic made it through 3 rounds but could not cope with a brilliant performance from Chung, while at the same time clearly struggling physically. Chung's ability to turn defense into attack and prevail in epic rallies was reminiscent of Djokovic himself. And now we have a look at this evening's weather forecast. Over St. Kitts and Nevis tonight, we can expect partly cloudy to cloudy conditions with a chance of showers, moderate. Seas are moderate to locally rough with heights of 1.5 to 2.1 meters or 5 to 7 feet. As small craft operators and sea bathers should continue to exercise caution against marginally safe seas, especially on the Atlantic side of the islands. Winds are east-northeasterly at 12 to 16 miles per hour over land and increasing at times to near 19 miles per hour over coastal waters. The sea level pressure is 1015.9 millibars or 30 inches. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:33 a.m. And that look at the weather brings us to the end of this evening's news presentation. We close with a recap of today's top stories. Nationally, 45-year-old Shirley Dawn Morton is possibly the country's second homicide victim. Internationally, Saudi Arabia has pledged $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. And in sport, Novak Djokovic has been eliminated from the Australian Open by Hyun Chung. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. I've been your presenter, Ebony Brandon. Still to come in just a moment, Carib Update. Goodbye.